If you're a buyer's agent, I want you to steal this exact framework. Using this framework, we generated $569,300 in profit for an investor client in just 16 months. And the crazy part, they didn't even lift a hammer, they didn't develop the land, they didn't even renovate the kitchen. I'm Shane Hiscock, founder of Locate Buyers Agency, operating the top 1% of the industry, and I've spent 4 years training buyers agents using the exact systems we use every day. Today, I'm walking you through exactly how we got those results, and more importantly, how you can replicate this exact strategy for your own investor clients. Most buyers agents think their job is simply to find a property that ticks the boxes on the client's brief. But the top 1% operate completely differently. Elite buyers agents think like a developer, like a renovator, and a future buyer all at once before they even make an offer. If you only focus on what your client wants today, you're leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. You have to focus on who will want the property in the future. In this episode, I'm breaking down 2 real case studies and giving you the exact framework to identify, secure, and leverage high-growth investment properties. Let's set the scene. Back in November and December of 2024, we were tasked with purchasing 2 investment properties for a client. Our strategy was specific. We suggested purchasing post-war homes in good locations with future potential for redevelopment. This is a strategy that we've used extensively to help investors make significant gains. The beauty of this approach is that regardless of whether the client decides to actually develop the properties or not, buying the right type of property with the correct characteristics results in premium returns, even if you do absolutely nothing. The first property was secured off market in November of 24 for $1,135,700. The second property was also off market a month later for $940,000. Both met our strict criteria for a high growth property. The client simply rented out both properties while they decided what to do next. Later, they decided to sell. The first house sold for $1,375,000, a $239,300 gain in just 13 months. The second house sold for $1,270,000, a $330,000 gain. Total profit, $569,300. How do we do it? Well, it comes down to a clinical strategic approach, starting with the most important principle of all. The first step in this framework is what I call the multiple exit strategy. When you're buying investment properties for your clients, it's critical to understand all of the market demographics who could potentially want that property in the future. Most agents and investors only think about one use case. They think this is a great rental property or this is a good family home. Elite buyers agents look at the property and ask how many different types of buyers will fight over this 5 years from now. The 2 properties we bought had a number of potential options. The most expensive property had the potential to be subdivided into 2 blocks. The lower cost option, that was simply a knockdown rebuild opportunity, meaning the house could be removed and a brand new house could be built in its place. But of course, they weren't the only 2 options. With both homes, they were solid enough. You could simply renovate them, improve them. An owner-occupier could move in. You could resell them. There are a lot of options. Why does it matter to have multiple exit strategies? Because it means you have multiple buyer types who'll be interested in the property. If the market turns and the investor suddenly needs to sell, a property with multiple buyer types who'd be interested in it, that protects them. If developers stop buying, the home renovators may still want to buy it. If renovators pull back, then a family who wants to build their dream home may be interested. So you've got a lot of different exits. When you buy a property with minimal red flags, a strong location and the right layout, you guarantee a high level of demand no matter what the broader market conditions are doing. You insulate your clients from risk. The second piece of the puzzle is micro-location. And I don't just mean picking a good suburb, I mean getting down to the specific street and even which side of the street you're buying on. Exactly where you buy will have a massive effect on how quickly the property's value rises. Let's look at the 2 homes from this case study. The first home was located within a few hundred metres of a new small estate. In that estate, the price for new townhouses was actually higher than the price we paid for the house sitting on a great sized block of land. Also, there are several new houses on small lots selling in that estate at really high prices. So that micro-location signaled that developers and builders were already achieving premium end values nearby and that home buyers saw value in that area. The second home was within walking distance to a main shopping area, cafes, supermarkets, bakeries, that kind of thing. But crucially, the street itself was full of older houses on bigger blocks. It was absolutely right for renovation and rejuvenation. You have to look beyond the property boundaries though and look at what's happening 200 metres down the road and in the surrounding areas. What precedents have been set by recent sales on the next street over, for example? What school catchments are properties sitting in? Where have developers bought and they're about to build new homes? This is where the real value is hidden and where you can accelerate returns well beyond the general market. To bring this down to numbers, property number one that we purchased for the client, it beat the Suburb growth rate for the same period by double. So the Suburb grew by 10%. Our client's property achieved 21% growth in the same period. For property number two, again, over the same time period in the market had grown by 20%, but our clients achieved a 35% growth on their property. That is a standout result. This brings us to the third concept, the Suburb Rejuvenation value loop. When you buy in these specific micro locations, you're taking advantage of a self-reinforcing cycle that most investors completely miss. As a suburb rejuvenates and older homes are sold off, developers and owner-occupier homes come in. They knock down the old homes and they build brand new ones. This does two things simultaneously. First, it reduces the supply of the remaining knockdown opportunities. Scarcity increases. And then second, it pulls up the value of the remaining older homes because when the developer builds a new home and sells it for a premium price, especially right now with building costs in Queensland heading north in a big way, that high sale price establishes a new precedent for the street and the value of the opportunity to knock down increases even more. So effectively, the rising tide lifts all boats. By securing a property with development potential in an area that's actively rejuvenating, you're essentially letting the developers down the street do the heavy lifting for your client's equity. Now, before we get into the technical skills you need to actually execute this strategy, if you're listening to this and you're realizing that you want to be having these high-level strategic conversations with your clients, you need to check out the Elite Buyers Agent community. We provide the exact frameworks, the mentorship, and the technical training that the top 1% use to secure these types of results. We'll help you move from just finding houses to actually building wealth for your clients. Of course, to execute this strategy, you have to master the technical details. You can't just guess. You need to become an absolute area expert. To do that, I suggest you start with picking 3 or 4 suburbs and learn everything that's going on in those suburbs. You'll start to see the trends. You'll notice which properties sell fast, which ones sit on the market for months. And the key here is to spend time reflecting on what you're seeing and asking yourself, why did that happen? Learn to recognize the patterns. Why did house A sell in 3 days while house B took 3 months? You have to learn the value of things like location, the value of elevation compared to being low-lying, the impact of block shape and size. A block with a severe slope might look identical on the map to a flat block, but it costs a lot more to build on, and if you're an owner-occupier, it makes it a lot more difficult and complicated, making it far less valuable. Then you should understand the zoning definitions for your area and the councils that you work in. What do the different zoning types actually mean? What do they allow for? As in, what can you do there? Is it better to buy in that zone or detrimental for the top property type that you're looking at? Can you subdivide? Can you build a duplex? Can you build medium density? This knowledge is free to acquire, but it costs you your time. But it gives you a massive competitive advantage over agents who just look at the photos and the price guide. It's also important to know that you can apply the approach that we've been discussing earlier to different types of strategies. What I mean by this is that you can use the skills that you've learnt to spot trends, how to understand buyer types and to analyse the market to find many other types of opportunities. It's not just that houses on big blocks that are post-war are the best investments. Let me give you another quick example. Recently, we noticed a trend in renovated apartments in well-located, older brick walk-up buildings. They were selling like hotcakes and there was a lot of competition. We suggested this strategy to a client to secure a very basic, unrenovated apartment with a good floor plan in a prime location, do a quick cosmetic renovation and then relist it. So we purchased this property for him in June 2025 for $680,000. He completed a renovation that cost around $50,000 and he sold it in December 2025 for $880,000. That's $150,000 gross profit in 6 months. The principle's exactly the same. A renovated brick walk-up in a great location appeals to first home buyers, downsizers, investors. There's multiple buyer demographics fighting over the one type of asset. And we already knew from being in the market that there are a lot of competition for that type of property. Finally, none of this works without a relentless search process. Once you've honed in on your exact strategy and you know what you're looking for, you have to focus on your search efforts with absolute intensity. You'll likely be told that what you're looking for doesn't exist and that you're dreaming, especially at the price that you want to pay. But you have to persist. Keep going, constantly make your phone calls, constant emails, continuously text messaging, constant inspections. Often, we even resort to driving the streets looking for opportunities, making a target list of properties that could suit our clients. But you have to outwork the market. The strategy gives you the map, and your work ethic uncovers the treasure. But there's one thing that I believe is more important than both strategy and work ethic, and that's mindset. One thing I know works is to constantly be reinforcing a positive mindset. I can't tell you how many times I've heard stock is tight or there just aren't enough options out there. The trouble with listening to those comments and taking any of that feedback on is that you'll start to believe it. As soon as you believe it, you're cooked, you're done. There's a concept called a results loop. Most people walk around letting outside results affect how they think. What I mean by this is they let the feedback, for example, like there's no stock, affect how they think. And then when it affects how they think, that then has an effect on how they feel. And they'll start to feel, oh, it's a waste of time making phone calls, or it's a waste of time trying new methods. There's just no stock. And then with those thoughts and feelings, you decide, well, it's not worth taking any action, and you slow down. And guess what? You then definitely won't get any results. The big shift here, and this is in my view, the biggest hack of this whole episode, is to always control what you think. You do this by constantly affirming things like, I always find amazing properties for my clients. The perfect property is on its way. Every action I take gets me closer. I'd say grab a notepad, write these out in the morning 50 times and literally brainwash yourself and watch what happens. By doing this, you'll maintain a more positive outlook, you're less affected by outside noise, and then because you feel better, you'll take more actions. And when you take more action, you'll get more results. It sounds simple, I know, but I've used this hack to just keep myself on track, to keep my team on track, and I see it time and time again. By using that kind of method, you're reinforcing that positivity, you're more excited, you have more energy, and then you'll jump in and you'll just do more and you will find the property. Works, give it a try. To recap, if you want to generate extraordinary results for your investors, you have to stop thinking like a standard buyer's agent. You need to look for properties with multiple exit strategies to protect your client's downside. And then also you need to analyze micro locations down to the street level. I, at one point, bought a property for a client where I knew across the road, a developer had bought a site and he was in the planning stage of getting ready to build that property. And I knew, and I'd seen this developer build all around Brisbane. And when he built, he often didn't just build one house, he'd often build 2 or 3 in a row. He'd sell them for a really high price and that would just lift the value of the whole street immediately. So once we knew that, we had the property across the road under contract. Of course, we went ahead with it. And he built that new property. It was finished within 12 months and it pulls the value of the post-war house up a couple $100,000 straight away. So that's why you should analyse these micro locations right down to the street level. You should also leverage the Suburb Rejuvenation value loop, master the technical details of understanding zoning and block topography, and then execute with a relentless search approach to find the perfect asset for your clients. Most importantly as well though, is to brainwash yourself so that you're constantly in action, you're working from a positive outlook, and remember what I said in our episode on lead generation. The absolute best lead generation strategy in the world is to do an amazing job for your clients. When you come up with a clinical strategy, you communicate constantly and you achieve results like a $569,000 gain in 16 months, your clients will rave about you. They'll become your marketing team. When you come up with a clinical strategy, you communicate constantly and you achieve results like a $569,000 gain in 16 months, your clients will rave about you. They'll become your marketing team. If you'd like to learn more on how to execute at this level, make sure you jump on and join the Elite Buyers Agent community. Of course, once you've actually found the right property, it opens up a whole other world of challenges. How do you accurately value the property? And how do you position your negotiations? How do you stop it from going to the open market when you know it's a great price? These are the exact topics we'll cover in future episodes. Make sure to tune in.